Welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode number 27 of Van Halen Stories. Today, my guest is the awesome Mark Kendall from Great White. You know, a lot of people know this, but, you know, Great White and Mark Kendall and the whole Van Halen thing tie together even further back than we know Great White from the 80s, right? This goes back to when you're a kid. In the what area did you grow up in, though, in LA?
Well, when I was about 12 years old, we moved to El Monte. And I'd been playing guitar since I was like 9, but I did other things too. You know, I played baseball. I did all the things kids do.
Sure.
You know, get in trouble, ride mini bikes, whatever. You know what I mean? And but I was trying to get better on guitar, and I became friends with a guy called Greg Parent. His brother actually was killed in the Manson murders. He was the first guy that named Stephen Parent. He just was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Anyway, so by the time I think I was about 13, I played with Greg, and we recorded on a reel-to-reel, and I played the rhythm in Oye Como Va by Santana.
Right.
and just, you know, learning my way around the neck, getting better, improving, and the better I got, the more I was into it, and learning, you know, Trower and stuff when I was 14, Santana songs, you know, and then got in a band when I was 15. You know, we started playing around the backyard circuit, and, you know.
Right. Now, El Monte,
Yeah.
You said El Monte. What is the proximity, for most people who don't know this, what is the proximity to Pasadena?
Pasadena is probably, I want to say maybe 12 miles.
So not far.
Yeah, all local.
Okay, yeah. So the Van Halens, of course, started out in the local scene there, and a lot of people I've been interviewing were from that local scene. Now you see them when you're 15. What age were you when you first saw them?
Actually, it was a couple years after that. I believe I was almost 17.
Okay.
And because my family moved to Huntington Beach, but I stayed in touch with this bass player, and we were playing in Huntington Beach and around the inland area, and in a band. And he called me one day and said he had a job for me in this potato chip factory, and we were going to play 5 sets a night in a cover band.
Okay.
And he told me about Van Halen. He had seen them. He goes, "You got to see this guitar player." And so they played in this junkyard like 3 blocks from where I used to live. And he lived like 3 doors down. So my mom, I didn't have a car then. My mom would drop me off at his house, and I'd spend weekends and whatever. And anyways, we walked to this gig, and I'm going to see Van Halen for the first time. And it cost us $1. We walked in, kegs, you know, and I'm real excited to hear this guitar player because you've never heard anything like it. And when we first walked in, Dave Roth was laying on the ground, like blowing a tube inside of the floor tom to make the pitch go up and down. And he was doing this like Wipeout type solo. And it was a lot of people. And I'm sitting there dying to hear this guitar player. I think the first song was, I think it was a Bad Company song or something. And I could tell right away when he played the solo section that it's something I'd never heard before. Like it was like kind of outside of the box. And
so it wasn't as they weren't like, you know, yeah. I remember they used to play "Can't Get Enough of Your Love." I know that was one of the songs they played.
Yeah.
And so if you're talking about a solo, you know, that would be a simpler solo, but I guess he would embellish.
Yeah, but he embellished. He didn't do it like I've heard the song. I don't even know I wish I could tell you the exact song, but I've heard the Mick Ralph's solo, and it wasn't like that. He didn't do that. Right. He did his own thing. And I was already before that familiar with Jimmy Bates, who played in Stormer,
right.
And he had that kind of style. But now here's this other guy that plays kind of outside of what you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, like, kind of ultra gifted. Like, you could tell, like, like this guy plays like Satan. What's going on here, And, so I was kind of infatuated. And they also played a couple cover songs. I mean, a couple original songs. These guys got their own music. The singer was he acted like they already made it and this was their third tour or something. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm going, God, man, this is the type singer you need. This guy's just totally engaging the crowd, just like, so confident and like, so this was like almost like a learning thing for me to see that.
Right.
And then we started following them around everywhere they played, and like I said, we're playing in this pretty much all covers, we're just playing in a cover band.
Mm-hmm.
And we have about probably 80 songs. I mean, we were playing like 5 sets a night at some of the places they played. But one time I was interested because we were just playing on the weekends and we had, day jobs and whatnot. And we were sitting on the stage next to Dave Roth at this club called Walter Mitty's. It was a biker bar. And we asked, how do you get your gigs? Because they played like every night. Right. It's like, so you guys don't work it. I mean, how do you get your gigs? And the singer, Dave Roth or whatever, he said, me and Ed just get on the horn, man, and we, get our gigs ourselves, I go, that really was my inspiration because I go, if we're ever going to have a chance to, go up a couple notches, or, reach any kind of goal, whatever that might be, we need to play more often.
Right.
And that didn't really happen until years later, when I was playing originals, I really kept that in my mind, because no way am I ever going to play like Eddie Van Halen. I mean, that's already not going to happen. And plus my influences were different. But what I loved about Eddie Van Halen is, for one thing, I'd never heard anything like it before. And except apart from Jimmy Bates, he did play, like I said, that outside the box. And there's even a couple licks that I think Eddie might have borrowed from him. Mm-hmm. I just remember there was a couple things that I'd never heard anyone do. And I'm a guitar fan, so I heard it I heard everybody.
Right.
But these guys, but I think what Eddie did, he was already kind of playing that way, and he really refined it. But when I saw him that night, he had a Les Paul. There was no tapping or whatnot. There was nothing that he ended up, when he started evolving and trying new things, and he really created a lot of music with the extra finger. Sure. A lot of melody, but it was a trip that the skill level was so beyond anyone else. It was like he was up here, but when he would play like a Trower song or whatever, and I didn't hear the Trower lead, it was kind of weird. But I go, I think the way this is going to work is when they do their own music, then it's really going to fit. So in fact, I think he used to do like a solo that was kind of like Trower. And then in another section, he would, kind of be more Eddie Van Halen.
Right. That's what I think I read that he would like do one like the solo, like the record, and then he would do a second solo that was kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, but even the first solo where he was trying to do it kind of close, he didn't do it exactly note for note or nothing. He just kind of wanted to do the melody kind of like the original song did,
Sure.
because they were dealing with clubs and
Sure.
fans that are going to listen to these cover songs. He didn't want to be so outside the box, you know. Right. He didn't alienate people or whatever.
Sure,
but his skill with his picking hand is one thing, especially after seeing him a few times, that no one really talked about his picking hand very much. They're always talking about his fingerboard stuff. But I noticed it probably after seeing him 4 or 5 times. This guy's right hand is so powerful and articulate. That's another thing that he's taken up to another level. I knew about every guitar player around LA, very healthy music scene, a lot of great players that I looked up to at the time. But no one, I think what happened was this guy just practiced more than everybody or something. You know, that usually translates into getting better when you're just obsessed with something. But his picking skills, even when he got to levels way beyond the local thing, no other guitar player, and I'm talking about the Steve Vais, the you know, that were highly skilled. No one had the right hand, the picking. If you listen to like the isolated version of like I'm the One or something,
yeah,
his picking hand is so powerful and articulate. I don't think there's no one I've ever heard do that. So there's definitely something to say about that. But
I was gonna say Tracy G and anybody else that saw him at this period that you're talking about early on, they all remarked that, you know, the tapping and all that was like icing that came later, but they were most impressed by this initial, not totally boxed player. I mean, it's 4 scales or whatever, but he would, from what I understand, he would still do stretchy stuff, different stuff, but it was more focused on the right hand, more traditional.
Yeah,
and that's what
it was a really it made you feel this certain way when you went and saw him play, like the band itself. It was it's not like you sat there and go, oh, these guys are for sure going to make it and go huge. It just, they created some kind of something that made you feel, I don't know, I'm just speaking out the top of my head a little bit, but I just, it was just something I'd never experienced seeing, especially a local band. You know, the way he played his sound, you know, it was just something super special, man. And it inspired me to get better.
Sure.
That was my whole thing. I want to improve. This guy is making me want to improve. So I would go home and just practice silly until I really thought, God, I really feel like I'm getting better. I'm getting around the neck. You know, I'm playing, I'm going home note for note, you know, and you know, I'm feeling pretty good about. Then I'd go see him play, and it was, you know, it wasn't a thing where, okay, I quit, I'm never going to be that good. It was more of a deal where I was pulling for them. Sure. I wanted them to improve. I wanted these guys to make it. I wanted, you know, they were number one out of every band in the whole Los Angeles area. There was a lot of great bands, though. I mean, it was a very healthy music scene, and especially when you open up the backyard circuit.
Sure.
You know, people were playing backyards, the clubs, you know, halls. Van Halen did so much on their own, and their work ethic was better than anyone. they took every element and gave them every chance to get an opportunity to do something really big. And I'm inspired. I was inspired more by that than even perhaps his playing or me wanting to play like that. I wanted to experience watching him play and have my jaw drop and walk out there going, holy crap. I was impressed every time I seen him play. I wasn't entertained. I was impressed. I was blown out of my socks when I saw him play. It wasn't a gentle little entertaining evening. It was fucking, holy shit, this dude is insane. You know, how does he do all that? Man,
I can imagine going back. You know, you go back for the second time, the third time, and you go.
Oh,
every time is special.
Yeah, and you know, I became really good friends with the bass player. I remember one time I seen him at it was a high school gymnasium or something. His wife is pushing one SVT, rolling a cabinet, and he had the other one behind her, and they were pushing the gear into the gig. And we got there kind of early.
She's not a very big girl either. I know. I've seen her in person.
and they've been married for years. In the early '90s, we got off this tour of Tesla, and my good buddy Craig Oler worked for Michael Anthony. So we played at his sister's wedding, and me and him wrote a song for his sister. Oh, yeah? And we went and we showed it to Michael Anthony. We went over there. And so I don't bring a guitar. I'm thinking he's got to have an acoustic. This guy's in Van Halen. You know, I'm sure he's got an acoustic. He goes, Mark, we get there, you know, we're going to show him the song. I figured he's going to have an acoustic. He goes, Mark, you know I'm a bass player, right? And I go, you don't have an acoustic? Seriously? We went up in his music room. He had about 70 basses that lined the room, and all his platinum records they were just stacked in the corner. That cobwebs. I mean, you know, these dudes are dead. He's humble, man, down to earth.
Wow. What year was that?
That was the early '90s. I'm gonna say somewhere around maybe '92 or something. You know, it's a real long time ago. But yeah, he's been married to that same girl forever.
Sue is her name. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, Sue, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, that was a lot of fun because we did this acoustically, right. And he played this acoustic bass, had flames on it and shit. Yeah, he's a badass, and our harmonies were so good. You know, he's got that voice, right. You know, and the higher range, and we had these 3-part harmonies and stuff. Sounded pretty good.
That's pretty cool.
But anyways, yeah, that was it. Kind of, and he's Michael. I know we're getting off the subject a little bit, but he's so down to earth in the sense. You know, I mean, we went on picnics together with his family. Went and saw his brother play guitar. He played kind of like Eddie, you know. Sure, yeah. He was you know, and whatnot. So he's really super down to earth, and it was a lot of fun. Even when I was on the road, Van Halen would be playing. I'd be in Dallas too, playing the next night at the arena. He goes, "Hey, come on down to soundcheck, man." You know, I go down to soundcheck. They had like 200 people at soundcheck, the radio contest winners and stuff. And yeah, I went to the Pound Cake video, you know, all this stuff. A lot of times I never really met Eddie and talked with him because there was always something wrong. Seemed like every time I went to meet him, it was, he's been drinking, you know, he's kind of being a jerk today.
Right.
Whatever, you know. But I didn't need to meet him. I was perfectly happy listening to him speak in interviews, watching him play.
Right.
You know, there was an old interview, it's on YouTube or whatever, where it's a very early part of his career, maybe after the first tour around that era.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he does an interview with somebody that's really long, and He's real honest, and it's brilliant. It's before he was on guitar magazines.
Right,
And
right.
he said he really wanted to be on a guitar magazine. That'd be so cool, you
Yeah.
know.
I think
Whatever.
that's that day on the green thing that was where he was at day on the green, and the guy was
Could be.
supposed to interview Pat Travers, and he didn't get to interview him. So Eddie goes, "You should interview me." And he goes, "Who are you?" He goes, "I'm Eddie Van Halen." Before anybody knew.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's funny when when somebody local does well. When they made that first record, I was probably the first few hundred to buy it. I mean, I was like in line at the store. I couldn't wait to just hover and listen. I was really interested how Dave Roth was going to sound up with the band.
Right.
That's one thing I was really wondering, and it melted with that guitar. It was perfect. I loved it. He, he doesn't have the big range, but the way he delivers the songs with a lot of attitude, a lot of conviction, a lot of confidence, very cocky. It was perfect. It was just perfect. It was a sound that happened when he sang and that band was playing together. It was one giant melting pot. It just all melded together perfect. I just love it. I really don't think there's another band that sounds like that,
Right.
which to me is that human thing that happens when people play together. When the Eagles play together, it sounds like the Eagles, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Van Halen plays together, it sounds like them.
Right.
Somebody else could play their song perfect, it wouldn't sound like them.
Sure.
They have something.
A chemistry. Your chemistry with
special.
people. Yeah, every chemistry, this with any change that you make in any band or any version that you've had of your band, you probably notice there's slight variations in that chemistry. Even though you still have the core of what you did with that band, you still have that subtle change that happens with a new guy like Brett, where you bring a new kid in and he's doing his thing.
Yeah, he's a great singer. But the sound of Michael Anthony's bass and the drums and the guitar, I saw it several times, and even when they played a cover song, it sounded like Van Halen playing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It is. So
that became such an iconic thing of theirs, though, that they would take all these covers that they played on the albums, and made them so much, so much that the Kinks were going, you made a better version of our song than we made.
Yeah.
That's
really a special time. It was a really special time. And when they got signed, not only was I thrilled about that, some bands were jealous. I couldn't believe it. I'm going, are you serious? Don't you realize? I mean, it can actually happen. I mean, if your stars line up, you can actually, this can happen. And it was at a time when, they had the new age, the skinny tie deal and all that. So it wasn't like, it was the era of Sabbath rules or whatever.
Right, right, exactly.
We're talking the Knack and all that.
Sure.
So for them to get signed, the timing of it, it'd be like some rock band gets signed when Nirvana first came out.
Right.
It was like oil and water. It didn't figure to happen, but I think Ted Templeman really pushed for that and really opened a lot of doors for their opportunity and made it happen. He, being vice president of Warner really helped a lot because he got tour support and it really helped them.
Yeah. So let me ask you this about the first album. Tone wise, you saw them live. You saw Eruption before Eruption came out on a record. I mean, what contrast the tone you heard in person versus the tone you heard on the record, and how that was?
Pretty much not that much different. I mean, he always had that tube saturation sound. It wasn't created from a distortion pedal or, he just, it was more of a thing like using the Variac and all that.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to push the tubes and get that real natural distortion, you know, to where like if you turn your guitar down, it's an acoustic, you know, when you crank it up, you know, it's just pushing the tubes real hard. And I'm sure that's from trial and error and figuring stuff out and getting the amps modded. And, you know, he went for more of the true note value with natural distortion that's created from pushing tubes. Mm-hmm. He had that live too. Plus, you know, it was him playing. There's a lot to say about that, because if he played through my gear, it wouldn't sound like me.
Sure.
It sounded like Eddie Van Halen playing through my gear. So, you know, his sound, it comes from his hands, you know. Mm-hmm. But of course, the tones that he went for were more true distortion, as opposed to something created, you know, with a pedal. Like he used pedals, right, but you know, he used an Echoplex, you know, which is tape, right, which is totally cool. Right. You know, it's funny because his gear, there was always something not, you know, it was like created in a garage by a mad scientist. It was a little bit messy, you know. It was like, you know, duct tape and spray paint and everything's going to be work out good, you know. All this stuff was taped to a piece of board, and you know, it was just his amps were all different colored grill cloth, and it's like he borrowed everything or something. Right. But when he played, it was like nothing you ever heard, man. And what was really special about it is it was where we lived, so we got to like experience their very early days, you know, mm-hmm, and watch this seed grow into something that went national. And when it did get to that level, now they're up here, you know, us local guys are still down in this area. Now they're blowing away bands that are upper echelon. Like they can't even deal with these guys opening for them because it's so scary. Mm-hmm. You know, they go out there and they're just so cocky and confident, and their show, from playing all those years in clubs and playing 5 and 6 nights a week, by the time they were on tour playing that first album, which is songs they'd been playing, their energy was just insane. I mean, they were just so tight. You know, when you know 200 songs in the covers, and plus you got 40 plus originals, and you play together that much, you're going to be tight, man. Mm-hmm. And luckily, Ted let him play just like he played live in the studio, because I think that's natural for him. You have to be a great guitar player to play with bass, drums, and guitar, you know, to fill that space. And, you know, you really do, because when you're playing a solo, there's no rhythm behind it, you know, and so you really, really have to be good to pull that off. I did it for a few years, you know, our first tour of Judas Priest and stuff. We were a trio, lead singer. It was tough, man. But yeah, so I'm grateful to be a part of that time for sure, man. And me and Tracy, we're both so inspired. You know, we were teenagers. We've known each other that long, Tracy G. Mm-hmm. Right. And used to go see each other play. And also we would talk about is Eddie Van Halen. You know, right, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You know, it's something else.
Yeah, his story, you know, like yours, just the impact that they had on him, you know, is an amazing story. And hearing it from you guys like this in a, you know, kind of a little bit more long form, more detailed way. You know, it's kind of a great thing to hear. You know, you had mentioned Jimmy Bates. You know, one of the things I recently, you know, because I just interviewed Carl Jaw, and he talked about Jimmy Bates some, and he has the Megas, and Carl has a Megazone. Like apparently Jimmy Bates had a
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, the Megazone. Yeah.
So I went and did some research on Jimmy Bates, listening to his tone because Carl had brought up how he got that tone out of his amplifiers and everything. That tone, what I noticed last week listening to it, is it sounds very much like a modern distortion, like a 5150 or something. I was shocked how distorted that sound was that he had.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was quite a unique tone, and I don't know, you know, it was a different sound than Eddie had for sure at the time, but can you talk about Jimmy Bates a little bit?
Yeah. I'm not sure what you heard, probably a recording or something,
I
but
did.
when I heard him play live, he did have a pretty traditional type Marshall sound,
Mm-hmm.
kind of in the vein of Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
They, I don't, I think Stormer was a really good band for me at the time. Maybe they weren't quite the whole package like Van Halen as far as the songs. The lead singer was different,
Mm-hmm.
but I liked them both bands for different reasons. I think, you know, as far as Bates, the reason I saw him first, so I didn't know Eddie yet until later, and I never heard anybody solo in that fashion. He was just you know, he played it like in that Eddie Van Halen style, you know. Plus, that was all I got to look at that time, apart from bands that we had guitar players that play more traditional.
Sure.
Like we're sitting here talking about Eddie Van Halen. Well, that's all I got to see. I'm sure, you know, the guy that lived near AC/DC and got to look at that probably has a lot to say about Anger, you know.
Right, right.
But what was special was the fact that we got to watch it, be inspired. We were musicians ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it'd be like, you know, if you're a pitcher and you're 16 years old, and then you go see a guy that throws 100 miles an hour and hit 40 home runs, you want to go see him play again. You know,
Sure. Right, right.
that's kind of what's Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, right.
We were so blown away. He inspired us to try to improve, and then we couldn't wait to go see it again. You know,
Right.
same with Bates. You know, they did a lot of shows with Van Halen, so those are the only two guitar players that played in that vein.
Right.
I'm not trying to compare the two.
Right.
Eddie was a little more refined,
Mm-hmm.
had a different right hand. Maybe like you're talking about, the sound might
Mm-hmm.
be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't agree that he just had this distorted, you know.
Okay.
He pushed the tubes too.
Right.
It might have sounded different on the recording though.
Right, right.
You know, who knows how cheapy that recording was?
It was
They
like
could have just thrown a mic up in the room.
it was probably it was a bootleg, so yeah, you know, who knows, and that kind of thing. Let me ask you about Randy Rhoads though, because this is kind of a thing that I hear a lot. It's like when people talk about Eddie Van Halen, this is, you know, you were there, so you tell me what your impression was. But
saw Randy Rhoads. I saw Randy Rhoads. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I was going to say is you had George Lynch, Randy Rhoads, and Eddie Van Halen. Those are the three names that come up a lot as the guys in LA
Right.
at that time. I guess Lynch was more a contemporary to Eddie, where Randy was a little later, right? Is that right? Pretty much, kind of like
Right.
when they broke. You broke later too, you know. Your band was later on as well, but so how would you you know talk about Randy and George and that whole dynamic between all those guys and yourself?
Just starting with Randy, I saw him play at the Starwood a few times with Quiet Riot,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know he was Guitar Hero. I just knew he, or, you know, in the vein of like an Eddie Van Halen, because the way those songs were constructed didn't really open it up to where he was doing the stuff that he did ended up doing in Ozzy.
Right.
So I didn't know, I wasn't really that familiar with how skilled he was until later. And then I realized, oh my God, this guy, you know, is totally incredible. I've come to find out my drummer that I had way back then told me that he gave lessons and stuff like that. Like he's really advanced with theory and, you know, knows what's up with different keys and how to play, you know, scales, and he can really help an up and comer. And
I'm going to interject into one thing there with Randy. One of the things that, you know, always comes up, it was PR'd in his recent documentary, is that there was this big competition between Van Halen and Quiet Riot. Whereas what you're telling me right now is like, just from watching Quiet Riot at the time, it wasn't a showcase for Randy's chops.
No.
So that makes Van Halen and Quiet Riot quite different at the time.
Oil and water. It wasn't even close. I mean, Van Halen had this huge following. Everybody went to see him. It was. I don't think if there was competition, it wasn't like those weren't two rivals. I don't think.
Yeah,
at least from what I was looking at,
they're so different. I mean, what you just said.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about this kind of English influenced kind of thing that Quiet Riot was doing, and Van Halen's this other thing. And how can they really compete when they're so different?
Yeah, and like I was saying about the way their songs were constructed wasn't for a guitar thing like Eddie. You know, the way their songs were, you knew the first time you went and seen them what was going on there. Mm-hmm. And when you saw Quiet Riot, it was, you know, their songs were great too, and it was a good band, and they played a lot. But they had these songs like Big Black Cadillac, and it wasn't like, oh, did you see that big long solo section? It was like there wasn't one, at least from what I remember. That's why I didn't know. And then when Ozzy got a hold of him, and that album came out or whatever, I'm going, holy crap, I missed it here.
Right.
Where with Lynch, he was always soloing, and you know, I would put him. You know, he was an out of the box player also that could also play melodic. You know, he was definitely in that range. You know, just some little, you know, down here a little bit, but you know,
The videos I've seen of Exciter, you see him doing a lot of improv, and you see him doing that. There are a few videos of it out there. You get you gotta get a feel for what it was like, what he was doing at the time. But again, it was like Van Halen was the whole package as a band.
Yeah. Well, George Lynch is a wonderful guitar player. I know he really takes it serious. He practices a lot. Yeah, Eddie was. He kind of lived on his own. I mean, as far as,
you
know, comparison to other local things or whatever. There wasn't really a lot. I mean, you know, Bates, he was outside the box. Songs weren't really there as far as the originals. They were good, but not, you know. Van Halen had some pretty good songs, even a lot of the ones that still maybe haven't made a record, you know. I remember the song called Put Out the Light. I remember some songs where they took bits and pieces and turned it into, like Voodoo Queen became something else. And
Mean Streets,
I had that 40 song demo that I gave Tracy, and only me and him. We never played it for nobody. We really kept, because the sound man who gave me that tape,
Right.
So they recorded just everything they knew for Ted Templeman. And this sound man, I think he did their first tour and maybe another one.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me a copy of all those songs.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I would kill you if this gets out. And I stayed true. I stayed loyal. I played it for Tracy. I go, dude, you got to promise me, man. Don't, I might get shot.
Right.
And we kept it a secret all these years. And then now it's on the internet everywhere. But I had that tape so long ago.
Right. That's
And
amazing.
yeah.
So did you see the black and white stripe strat in the clubs? Did you see it? The middle of the this
gosh, I know. Yeah, I remember the striped guitar, but it wasn't painted. It the first one I saw had tape. It looked like tape, I think.
Okay.
I think he taped it. He put tape on it and made
Really?
the stripes. Then later, he painted it like that.
Oh wow.
I could be wrong on that, but I kind of remember it almost looked like somebody put a bunch of tape on the guitar and using a knife or an X-Acto knife or something to make them different widths and
Right.
but I don't know, but I've seen him, go from the Les Paul Jr. to like he played an Explorer at one point.
Right. The Destroyer. Yeah.
Or Destroyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else did he play?
Because Chris Holmes and him had bought those Destroyers at the same shop. They had two Destroyers and.
Oh yeah, and then then he started playing more of the Fender style. I think he really glued into that probably better than anything else. But it always sounded like him, no matter if he played, Les Paul or But I don't know that a lot of people know he can play like me. He can play like Eric Clapton, or he can not do any of the stuff he does and just play like that. Just play pentatonic, stalker. If he just chose to not. He wanted to create something that no one else did, but have it be cool. I think have it be interesting, have it be memorable at times, and
right.
So I think he got so good that he goes, man, I'm getting pretty good on this thing. Yeah, maybe I can change the landscape a little bit and whatnot.
Right.
So I think a lot of skill there, a lot of dedication. From what I've heard, he just practiced like from the moment, like every moment of his.
Yeah, they said he carried it around with him, like crazy.
I did too. When I was 15, I'm not putting myself on that level, but from 15 to 18, I would not leave my guitar. I literally, if I walk to the store in Huntington Beach, I brought my acoustic with me. I didn't want to leave it because I'd have to be away from it for like 20 minutes. I didn't want to do that. I swear, there's a certain time in your life where it's almost like an obsession. Like the more you play and you think you're improving a little, you want more of that. So you just, also I could think about at school. It's like I had songs going in my head. I had solos going. It was like it just overwhelmed me.
Right.
That's all I could think about. But I'm playing like air guitar at my desk in school, and I was just like a crazy man.
Let me ask you this about Van Halen's influence across the LA scene. You said earlier that once they made it, that everybody kind of felt like, oh wow, somebody made it. The timing was really weird, as you said, but this kind of opens the door in the early '80s for yourself, for Quiet Riot to actually break through in '83. And then the whole thing that follows, I said this before. Somebody else said it. I heard this. Somebody said Van Halen started the '80s 2 years before it started. They actually were like, the '80s started in '78.
They really did. They led the way. They were the leaders. There are all of our heroes, and in 1982, when we got our opportunity, we actually got airplay, and it wasn't even a record deal. It was just a distribution deal with an EP. We had a German producer produce it, and we were on KMET and like heavy rotation with On Your Knees, 1982, and that gave us our opportunity. And I can thank Van Halen for that, because it had to start somewhere. And what better band than the best band around, to do it, And like I said, there was such an inspiration in it, not just Eddie's skills, but the band skills as a whole. They were just a wonderful band. They were so good, and they hit hard. I mean, this was man style shit that, I mean, that singer meant business, but in a very, not in a heavy metal way, more like an entertainment, not kissing ass. That's one thing. His entertainment came from his brain, worked pretty well. I think that's what sold Ted Templeman. At first I heard it was talked about getting Sammy Hagar real early. But when he started speaking with Roth and realized, man, this guy's lyrics are insane. This band, it glues together real good. I'm just going to make him sound good sonically, because his attitude and everything and his brilliant lyrics. And I think Ted Templeman really liked the way he spoke, very intelligent. And so I'm really happy that they kept that unit together and waited until down the road when things didn't work out and whatnot. But
Templeman's on record, I believe, saying that he would have made the biggest mistake in rock history had he actually changed that lineup.
I think so. And it would at least turned off the people that, like me, that grew up with them, that wanted to see him ride that wave a little extended further and let it wear itself out or whatever, or however that was going to work out. And I think it was about perfect the way they did it, after Jump, they just kind of, things, maybe egos or I'm not sure. I can say this about Dave Roth though. Every time I've met him, he wasn't putting on a show. So we're like, he's not in the press. He's not talking to a journalist. He would always say, hey man, what have you guys been up to? How are you doing? How's it going with you? How's the family? How's the tour? You know what I mean? So it wasn't about him. He wants to know what I'm doing. So, this bit about he's just this mad egomaniac and he's just me all the time. I never experienced that.
Wow.
Of course, when he gets on the stage or, he's going to go out there to rip your face off or whatever. But like, if you're just talking one-on-one, he's pretty personable.
That's amazing. You talk about one of the things you kind of just hit on just then was that when I was a kid, I'm quite a bit younger than you, but I was catching the last part of the 70s with my uncle. We were going to see Foreigner and early days of Foreigner. There's this shift that happens from those kind of bands that were in the 70s to this exciting, powerful band that Van Halen was. It became more than just going up and playing your songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kiss was an outlier. It was kind of like something that when I looked at Kiss, I just thought that was not something I could ever do. But when I saw Eddie Van Halen, he inspired me like he inspired you. To get in my room, woodshed, and do the best I could do for me. That was kind of the same vibe. So how do you feel like that change between mid-70s Bad Company, Foreigner, and in the 80s that were inspired by Van Halen, that whole shift?
I think at least I could probably speak for every band that grew up and watched them develop. And I think it had to do with their development. It had to do that they came out of a garage, or, you know, got better from playing together, and, you know, and Eddie sitting on his bed and getting better on guitar. And, you know, it was so human that when they took that seed and just kept improving and improving and doing all the right things and giving themselves the best chance for the stars to line up, it inspired all of us going, God, if we work really hard too, maybe we'll get an opportunity, you know? So I think that's the difference. You almost feel like some bands were put together and they're already experienced musicians on their own, and they were thrown together, to where Van Halen like met in high school, and, you know, hey, oh, you play bass, dude, or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right,
So
okay.
there was more of a human connection. They started out, maybe they weren't so good, and maybe they got better. You know, I've seen stories about Eddie was learning Iron Man off a record, you know. So just like your typical teenager, he just, I think he worked really hard. He had skills from playing piano.
Right.
He, you know, so he had a very good ear for music, and he just practiced like absolutely obsessed demon. You know, he was just, and he just got really, really good. And they got great from playing together, though. You know, that's one thing that can't be said enough. They kept getting better and better and better, and they were constantly playing shows, you know. When I think of Foreigner, I think of just the most awesome band ever that wrote, I mean, their writing skills were the most insane ever. Van Halen, I envision coming out of a garage, a backyard, fought and scratched their way, you know, and damn it, we made it, we did it, you know.
Right.
And that's one of the things that, you know, something that almost seemed impossible, they made happen from their killer work ethic, you know. And we all got to look at that and just go, holy shit, man, paid off.
Right. And for you, it was the same thing. You know, you were inspired to do that by those guys, right? And then you have this dream, like so many people had in the '80s, to look at them and go, that's how you do that. That's how you do that. You go work your ass off, and then, you know, you
work your ass off,
put your best, you know, your best effort out there, and hopefully that will turn out. And for Great White, you know, like you said, you had that record where you got out there on the radio without any record deal. And, you know, I became aware of you because I really, you know, I was introduced to Van Halen through their video for Unchained when it came on Don Kirshner's rock concert when I was a kid. You know, kind of like when you talked about, I heard you talk about Alvin Lee and Woodstock film, you know, the same kind of thing. You saw that, right? And then that inspired you. Well, I saw Van Halen live on that particular video that we all kind of know about. But, you know, that whole thing started my whole career, my whole journey started from seeing this band going, wow, this is what it could be, you know, and that's kind of, it inspires all these other bands to start what we know as the '80s, and yourself. And so when I watched that, I immediately, you know, thought, God, there's got to be other guys. There's got to be other guys like this, guys that have tone like that, you know. And I immediately like started looking for other guys, right? And so first person besides that was George Lynch. I saw the Breaking the Chains video, and I thought, I love the tone of that, the guitar sound on that.
Yeah.
And then later I would see you know, I would see your videos and hear your tone, and I would just loved your tone, man. You and that whole organic tube tone that you guys got, it would just spread like wildfire through the whole rock and roll scene after that.
Yeah. You know, there were so many for some reason around that era, like in the mid 70s and latter part of the 70s, there were so many bands in LA it it was just a great time. It was just fun, and we got to see Van Halen. Man, that was so cool. It gave you something to do.
Right, right.
Yeah. It's like, hey, let's go see Van Halen, dude. All right, cool, man.
Well, let me ask you this about guitars, since we hadn't really talked about guitars. But Eddie, this black and white stripe thing and the whole movement towards custom guitars. One of your cool guitars? I don't know if you still have this guitar, the Great White guitar that's actually shaped like the shark. You still have that thing?
So yeah. Dick Clark called our offices and said he wanted my shark guitar for their Hard Rock Cafe in Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
So because they like to put memorabilia in there, and that was kind of a signature thing that the band name and everything. So I said no problem, of course. Dick Clark, I'm sure. And then it moved around. It went to Hawaii, Rio. A friend of mine, guy at Guns N' Roses, told me they'd seen it in Rio. So they move around so everybody gets to look at it and whatever. So I had another one made that's even actually played good, and from a guy in Las Vegas named Michael Reisinger. He's a guitar maker, and it looks more like a mean, cartoonish, but kind of mean looking.
Yeah.
And it was built over a guitar that sounded good.
Right.
This thing was actually just a shark. It sounded like hell, but I somehow managed to play one song live, just so kids could look at the guitar.
Right.
It played like crap. It was horrible.
But that was sort of a thing back then. Like everybody wanted to have a guitar that was identifiable to them, right?
Yeah.
So that
was fun. Fun to do that,
That's wild, man. That's such a crazy thing. One of the things
the guy that made, I wanted to speak on who made the guitar.
Yeah.
Because he made a guitar for George Lynch, the Skull and Crossbones one.
Yeah.
J Frog. He worked on the J Frog. He worked on the movies and he's the one that did my shark.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. One of the things I ran across in my looking through all this information was that there was a mural. Now tell me about this mural. Is this Gazzari's mural thing? Does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah. Well, Gazzari's Bill Gazzari, he really loved the fact that Van Halen made it, and he used it to kind of promote his club. But I'm not sure who else had played there. I only played there one time. It was on a Sunday, and we played all originals, and it wasn't even Great White. It was my band before we changed to Great White. But once we got a record deal and we're on the radio, he painted a picture of me up on the wall next to like Eddie Van Halen and the Doors and Jim Morrison and all this stuff.
Is this outside on the wall?
Yeah, outside. It was a mural just like painted on the wall. It had Alex, everybody in Van Halen. It had Huey Lewis and the News, Nikki Sixx from Motley.
Right.
Just kind of showing you, look at this LA scene, dig it. This is a legendary club where Van Halen used to play all week long. And then they would go and play their showcase gigs on the weekends with their original. Right. But that's how they ate, they played there. So I think Bill Gazzari wanted to kind of pay homage to all the bands that had played there and say, check it out and dig it. All these bands are out and they all made it and they're all doing great. And they started right here,
Right.
And so it's kind of neat, to have me right in the center of all these like badasses, I don't know if I'm really worthy or whatever, but whatever.
Well, you were there, man. I got your first. I had, when I did that with the first Great White album, I definitely had that. It's still probably sitting over here in my record rack, actually. But yeah, I loved all your albums, all your guitar sounds.
Thank you, man.
I ran across one time. I was in LA and I was getting a custom guitar made by Yamaha.
Oh.
And I was in their shop. This is in '91, and they were making you a guitar. They were
Oh yeah,
they mentioned that this guitar was your guitar that they were working on that day I was there, and I was like, oh wow, cool.
yeah.
They
I
had mentioned that.
tried some
And
different things.
yeah, and then there's a couple other items. One is that you guys were on Unplugged by MTV,
Yeah,
and this was early on in the Unplugged series, right?
it was the very first show.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That's such
we
a cool.
played we recorded the same day with the Damn Yankees,
Wow.
which was basically Ted Nugent and some guys from Night Ranger and Styx, I
Right.
think. Yeah, and then Don Henley was on the same day, but they played the shows on 3 separate weeks.
Right.
But we recorded back to back on the same day.
Wow. That's such a cool.
Yeah.
That's such a cool historical
Yeah.
item that I ran across. I thought, man, people need to know that happened.
You want to hear some funny trivia?
Yeah.
The night before we played on Unplugged, which we thought it's going to be really fun because we're giving people a different look at the songs with acoustic guitars.
Sure.
And my manager called and said, "Learn, babe, I'm going to leave you. We're going to do it tomorrow." And I'm like, before any no rehearsal, and this. I mean, it's a pretty big arrangement to just go wing it. It's not like playing like Johnny Be Good or Tush or something.
Right.
So he goes, "Yeah, just learn it. Jack knows it just like the record, so play it, close to that or whatever." So I was a little confused about the arrangement. Went over it one time in the dressing room, and we sound checked it once. So luckily, he knew it really good. So I was kind of following his lead a little bit, like sometimes I'd go to change too soon, and I'd play some lick that would get me out of it and go back.
Right.
It's funny. You can tell I'm nervous if you watch the video. And then at the very end, when I know I'm going to make it through because it's the last few chords, I put my head up. I'm all happy.
I'm going to make it.
And then the MTVs, they put that song in rotation. Of course, the one I'm like confused about. But it turned out good though. It for just winging it and not really knowing the song.
Well, it happens sometimes. Here's a funny story out of your history that I ran across. George Lynch steals your singer in Dante Fox. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Here, you want to hear something funny about that? Is we had a girl singer.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the first singer we had. It was a girl singer named Lisa Baker. Great singer, man. She was badass. Anyway, so yeah. She was off one night somewhere, and Lynch said he wanted her to sing in his band,
right.
And so she came and told us, "I'm quitting. I'm going to join George Lynch." And so we got the singer named Butch Say, who was kind of like Rob Halford, like sang stuff like Exciter, like Perfect,
right.
Had all kinds of power, real high range, really like a Rob Halford, and so. This corporate dude from Microsoft about 6 years ago hired Lynch Mob, Great White, and Night Ranger to play for 100 employees for Microsoft at his house in Texas, and in full production, like stage, lights, PA. I mean, badass production, right? So Lynch is, he's a little bit drunk, and we're just having a good old time. I'm sitting there with guitar player for Night Ranger and Brad Gillis and stuff. And he goes, "Hey man," he goes, we're laughing and just joking, just shooting the shit. And he goes, "Hey man, I'm sorry. I wanted to apologize for stealing your singer years ago." I go, "What?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. You got the best end of that."
It worked out, right?
Yeah, he goes, "You got the best end of that deal."
That's funny.
Hey, it's just funny. He apologized like 30 years later.
That's hilarious.
I don't care about that, man.
Right. Turned out
That's up to her.
Right.
Worked out great. Worked out great for us.
Oh, and you climbed the mountain like Van Halen did, and that's something that a million people who didn't get to do that would love to have been you. So
yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah, you start out, and you're trying to put the puzzle together, and this was kind of our the embryo of trying to make a band, so we had to get the singer right and get, it took a minute, and we didn't even use the same drummer, didn't have the same bass player when we got our opportunity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The bass player had only been in the band 3 weeks. The guy that quit the band, Don Costa, ended up in Ozzy.
Right.
Played with Ozzy for about I think he only lasted a month. He did a few things you ain't supposed to do, but
right. Probably pretty easy to do there.
Upstaging Ozzy is not a good idea.
Right. That's wild. So let's close it out with just a little bit more about Van Halen. His passing a few years ago, it's kind of like one of the reasons why I decided to do this, because I felt like, maybe these stories about all this stuff in the early days needed to come out.
Yeah.
And that, somebody needed to talk about it, and my friend Greg Renoff, who I often talk to, had a book out called Van Halen Rising, where he interviewed a lot of you guys.
Yeah.
And so sort of, this is sort of like a long form, podcast version of that. It's sort of a way to get in touch with people who were there and flesh it out even more. Reflect on the day he passed, and where were you and your feelings?
Just kind of stunned. I kind of knew he had some health issues years before that.
Sure.
Knew he had a few alcohol issues, which really his illness didn't stem, I don't think, from anything to do with that.
Right.
But I'm an alcoholic myself, so I really related to that.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm kind of shy too, and I always use alcohol for a vehicle to get through my fears and shyness and whatnot.
Right.
So I quit drinking about 15 years ago, but I had to learn to be comfortable in my own skin. Sure. Without using anything to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So I always related to Eddie on that level. And then it was a shame to lose him. But as just like with anybody, but he left behind so much with his son and his killer skills he has. I mean, playing all the instruments. I mean, it reminds me of like one of your hero pro baseball players, and then he has a kid, and that guy becomes a badass baseball player.
Sure.
It's that DNA. It means a lot. My dad was a jazz trumpet player. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's an accident that my ear for music is pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
But losing anybody like that, because he created so many memories for me that it'll always stick with me forever. I mean, I'll never forget seeing him play and watching that band play, man, when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Guitar, and being able to watch him and have that inspiration and everything. I think it was hard on everybody. You wanted him to still be playing at 80 years old in some way,
Right.
And so you didn't really figure him to die at 65.
Yeah.
But we never know what's going to happen, and you just got to kind of appreciate everything you have.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the fact that although, maybe his marriage didn't work out and they both went their own ways, that, Valerie Bertinelli, there was, still a connection there.
Mm-hmm.
with their son.
Mm-hmm, sure. Yeah, it's an amazing story, right? The whole thing, his whole life was such an amazing story, and he inspired so many people. Some millions and millions of people.
I think his family and his love for his son, it's more than just him and the guitar. I think he was a good person and, family man, loved the hell out of his kid, bragged on him. I do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. If you want people to know, hey man, my kid's doing good, man. He's pretty badass. Wait do you see this or that? Like my son, one of them flies off buildings on skateboards. I can't wait to show people videos. So but so I related on that wavelength with him too. Yeah, very tough. Like I said, he created all those memories for me. I'll never forget him.
Right. Me too, man. Same thing. I appreciate you coming on, man, and talking about it. And I was thinking about this last night while I was just thinking about Eddie Van Halen. I was thinking about this whole thing. It's just really an appreciation for him that I want to share and have people like yourself come on and share. It's such a beautiful life he had and a beautiful thing he did, and in so many ways other than just the guitar.
He had a certain energy about him, and I really liked the way he vibrated. It was sometimes you meet somebody or you see someone and you just gravitate toward it because there's a certain frequency that they're at, and you can feel it. And he had that magic, that you wanted to be a part of.
Sure. Like you said, you saw him back in the day. You said that, you immediately were drawn to it. It was like so many of us,
Very quick. It didn't take me long to go, holy crap, what's going on here?
Right.
It just, everybody, they had the biggest musician following. And I mean, no one was even close to it. Everybody in the crowd was a guitar player. and they were all like rival bands. I mean, we were all playing, all the bands were there, but they put that aside for that night and to go, let's go watch this dude. He's badass. He's a mo.
Right. Right. Just the inspiration just flew from him, his smile. Even the way he emoted his emotions through his face.
And his shapes were like nobody else.
Right.
His stance, his look on his face, that right hand, the muscles coming out of his forearm, just things like that were just even way back then, it was, you knew you were seeing something. I don't know. It's very difficult to explain it because you have to explain the way you felt, and it's hard to put it into words. I can't do it perfect. Sure. I just know it was special,
Yeah. I really I see that, on us 27 episodes in, and every person that's been on, man, everybody has the same. It's so amazing to me how many people are touched in the same way that you're talking about.
Yeah, I like the one guy just made the description of them. It was the sound of that whole LA scene. It was a sound that you heard in the 60s with the Beach Boys floating through the air,
Right.
This was their era. And when they played, it was our environment. It was like they were,
Right.
They were the dudes, man. I don't know what to say.
Well, it's true though, with like the Beach Boys were a sound of an entire era.
Yeah. They had that, it was just a time where, surf music in general, the way, the Ventures and, I even had neighbors that used to play out of their garage that were surf dudes, they had the Gretsch guitars and the Guilds and whatnot, and had that twangy thing going on.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that music, it carries such magic inside of it? You see it when you go out and play gigs, and I do too. The only reason I started playing guitar is because of a band across the street.
I used to watch him through the window. I'm 9 years old, and I'm watching this bass player play with his teeth.
Wow.
I went running home, almost got hit by a car. I didn't even look both ways, and went running and begged my dad for a guitar.
Really?
He got me an acoustic. And within a year, I knew Gloria, Wipeout, Pipeline, Secret Agent Man, and For Your Love, and actually played in my 4th grade class. I was obsessed. Right away. Unreal.
Powerful, right? Powerful stuff we were involved in. And would you want to do anything else with your life than what you do? I doubt it.
My dad wanted me to be a pro baseball player, but I knew that was by the time I got 18. I played every year from 8 to 18.
Yeah.
And from 15 to 18 is where I really think I got my way around the net pretty good by the time I was 18. And I was so disheartened that 3 guys on my own team were better than me, hit more home runs, got more girls, threw harder, you know what I mean? Ran faster. And so I go, my chances at baseball are just not. And I loved music and guitar anyway.
Right.
You know, so definitely that was my
calling.
That's what I wanted for my life, you know.
So
no matter what.
Let's just do a little bit of PR for Great White. What are you guys doing, and what's your next 6 months look like?
Well, this Friday we're leaving for this Monsters of Rock cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be like 30 bands or whatever. Then we're playing the M3 Festival in Maryland, and then going to Detroit. We're playing. God, what's that gig? I can't. It's a new place. We used to play Pine Knob, but we're playing this other place. Can't think of it. It's on our website, officialgreatwhite.com.
Okay.
And shows come in all the time. So keep checking back, see if we're playing in your area or whatever. Yeah. Officialgreatwhite.com. Then Great White Band. We have to call our Facebook Great White Band because if you pull up Great White, you just get attacked with sharks everywhere. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And so we have to say, well, we're talking about the music Great White.
Right.
So
that's amazing. We're gonna have to get you into Alabama since Brett's in the band now. We gotta get you.
That'd be awesome.
We're gonna get you.
Also Tesla has to say Tesla Band because, or the cars show up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So.
That's awesome. Thanks for being with me today, man. I really appreciate it. I always loved your music and I always loved your guitar playing, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much.
Good luck with your show, man.
I'm just going to keep at it until I run out of people, and I don't think that's going to be soon.
Awesome, buddy.
All right, man.
Good luck, man.
Thank you, buddy.
See you later.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.